Hi, I'm Steve Pleich, and I'll be your host for this evening's program on Voices from the Village. As most of you know, CTV has gone through a pretty significant revisioning process over the last few months, and now this is the first live show, Voices from the Village, being produced under the new model, and we're really pleased to be here and hoping that this is going to be the first of many, many programs at CTV as we try to inform you as best we can and maybe even entertain you along the way. I'm very pleased to have as my guest of our first program, Micah Posner. Councilmember Posner, welcome.
Thank you. Congratulations on getting the studio back.
Yes, thank you very much. Everybody has worked very hard to have this done. And people might be interested to know that it really takes, a lot of committed volunteers to do this. You might think that all you have to do is point the camera at a good-looking guy like myself and the magic happens. Well, there's more to it than that. So we're really happy to be here. Micah, you are the co-author of a city ordinance before the council now on campaign finance reform. I know that you and I have both had an interest in this over time. And I'm delighted to see that now it's becoming substantive and really gathering some energy and momentum. I know you had a forum earlier this evening at the Police Community Room. Tell us how that went and generally kind of where you're going on this now.
Well, we had a great forum just left. People really connected the dots between our goals and visions about money and politics in general at the federal and state level where it's more obvious. And then I did present a proposal on what we can do locally. Which is the same as what's happening in 60 cities around the country. So people are saying this is my proposal. It's really not. It's really sort of our best tool for getting a handle on money and politics locally. It will go to the city council. I believe the staff and the mayor plan on it to go to city council on June 10th in the evening. So people can write that down and then maybe get interested as we talk.
And we'll certainly mention that as we go along. This is a call-in show, by the way, and it's live, so 425-8844, I think that's still our number, 425-8844. If you have a question along the way for Councilmember Posner, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer that. Let me preface some of this by saying that one of my main interests and one of the questions that one of the hosts here, Louis LaFortune, raised in the past is publicly financed elections. Do you see that happening? Before we talk about really the details of your ordinance and proposal, you think that's a possibility here in town for publicly financed elections?
Well, that actually is the proposal to some degree. So maybe I should lay it out and explain the connections. So currently we have a voluntary expenditure ordinance, which lays out two different sort of precepts. One is a per person and per organization limit. Now both these limits change with time.
Right.
So right now, as you know, it's $325 per person and $780 per organization. And then there's an overall limit that's established, which right now is $26,000 some odd, $26,400. So, and I'm proud to say that we have a pretty good culture in Santa Cruz in that people have always agreed to the per person limit. However, in the last, since the year 2006, I believe it is, people have started to go over the overall limit. Yes. So for a long time, for 10 or 20 years, everyone agreed to the overall limit. And this has happened at the same time that money in politics has just run crazy across the United States, and people, including some of the Supreme Court justices, have created this outrageous idea that money is the same as speech. So Santa Cruz has mirrored that, and that some of the candidates have started to sort of, run away with it. So my proposal, I'm calling it mine again, but the proposal that Don Lane and I are bringing to the council, it's co-sponsored by Vice Mayor Don Lane. And it's been reviewed by the city attorney. It's all legal, which is quite a feat itself, given the minefield of the constitutional law. Anyhow, so the proposal will do two things. One, it will make those voluntary per person limits mandatory. We can do that. The county has mandatory limits. The state actually has mandatory limits too, $4,100 per person. And then the second part of it is that for candidates who agree to the overall expenditure limit, there'll be a one-to-one match. So when you raise $5,000, $10,000, $13,000, the city will match that up to the limit, of course, of $26,000. So that'll do two things. It'll create a strong incentive for people to agree to the limit, and it'll be 50% public financing. So it will allow candidates to focus more on talking to voters, thinking about policy. unless
And,
I'm
and
raising
I
money.
think that's true, and it resonates particularly with somebody like me who's run for city council in 2010 and 2012. And again, this year, is that when I first ran in 2010, as you know, it was the Hillary Bryant Ranch. She raised $43,000. And so there was such an explosion of the total amount of money that people were raising, and nobody seemed willing really to voluntarily limit themselves to the spending limitation. When you ran last year and were so vocal, 2 years ago, excuse me, and we're so vocal about, let's really do something substantive about, campaign limitation, voluntary campaign caps on these limitations. I think there was some, understanding that maybe it's a direction we should go in, and yet maybe we didn't get as much cooperation as we could have. I think this is the kind of next substantive step we have to take to people understand, why you're doing it, why it's a good thing, and particularly, and I'll speak about this later, this matching aspect of it is really a game changer for candidates who are historically underfunded and yet still have some individual support in the community.
Yeah, I mean, when I ran, it became important to me, like as I learned about campaigning and electoral politics, it became clear to me that obeying a limit was something that I could do to walk my talk. It's like if you're a bicycle advocate, which I was for 20 years, you ride your bike everywhere, right? If you're a politician that wants to show people that you care about having a just system, then in my opinion, you agree to limits. That's just something that we should do when we have integrity. I mean, if you're running for president, maybe it's a pretty high limit, but if you're running for city council, 26,000 is plenty. I was at a bit of a disadvantage to make that a campaign issue because, I was saying that everyone should agree to limits, which helped me directly. So that's why we're doing this campaign now. We don't know who's going to run for city council. I guess you're running, but we don't know what the whole field is yet. There's only a few people that have signed up. And we don't know who's going to agree to the limit or not. So our goal, I think, as a community should be to communicate very strongly before August 1st, which is more or less the filing deadline, that this is something we care about, and to say it in a way that leaves other politics out of it. It doesn't matter whether you're, pro-development or anti-development, whether you're, pro-civil rights or whatever you call the other side of it. We just want to send that message that you should accept the limit. And so that's, in some ways, that's the more important campaign. I mean, I am excited that it's going to council on June 10th, and it's a rallying point, and I'm hopeful the council will pass it. But if the council doesn't pass it, that's okay, because this is a grassroots effort. It's a social effort, and we have every chance of convincing all the candidates to agree to these limits. And if they do, then we'll pass it next year.
And I think it's interesting that one of the things that I admired about your campaign 2 years ago is how efficient it was. How much, value, how much voter recognition, how much resonance you got from the community on the dollars you were spending. So you weren't just throwing money at a campaign just on a visibility point of view and saying, well, if I get my name out there long enough and hard enough and often enough, people are going to be able to vote for me because they at least know who I am. But it is interesting that 2 years ago, where you raised less money than Pam Comstock, and yet you outpolled her, and Don raised less money than Cynthia Matthews, and yet he outpolled her. So there is an equation in there that militates in my mind for efficiency in campaigning. And maybe that some of that efficiency can be, the candidates can be aware of that through some ordinance like this, where at least they're thinking about limitations of some kind.
Right. Part of the reason to do this is just not to waste money. I mean, we all know, those of us who knock on doors. You go knock on doors, and there's like 6 soggy, full color campaign flyers sitting on someone's doorsteps. It's just unnecessary. I mean, it does help you a little bit to spend more money. But it's just ultimately a waste of money. I mean, by agreeing to the limit, I had the time to do 22 neighborhood meetings in people's homes. Now, in the abstract, would it have been better to raise more money? I don't know, but it was certainly a more pleasant, more meaningful way to campaign. And by passing these limits, we present everyone sort of the opportunity to do that. I mean, and I'm hopeful that some of the candidates who didn't agree to the limit in the past will agree to it at the city council, because to be fair to them, you never know who's going to do it or whether it's a disadvantage. Everyone wants to win. I really want to win. I raised within a few $100 of the absolute limit. I mean, I definitely raised money.
I realize that,
But I felt like there were some other things that were more important than winning. But if we just change the rules, I think it's going to be a big relief to all the candidates. To just have a fair. It's like you sit down to play poker, right? And before you have a problem, You decide on the rules. You don't wait till after there's a problem. And if you don't decide on the rules, it's harder for people because they're sitting there thinking, well, I really want to win, and what do I do? I mean, it's hard enough to campaign. So I think we're going to pass these. It's going to be a big relief to everyone.
And I do think there really is a point of diminishing returns when you're raising money. For instance, and I was mentioning this earlier, a matching fund at $5,000 would be a game changer, frankly, for a candidate like myself, who really has a lot of individual support, but I really don't have a lot of deep pockets, who are willing to support my candidacy. And so when I get to 5,000, certainly I can do. Then I've got 10. And if I get to 15, then I've got 20, and to cap it at 26, as you were saying, we get to 13. There's that one last increment, but that can make so much difference for a candidate, like myself, just using myself in the abstract. Because it doesn't matter if I can raise that amount of money. If somebody raises $50,000 or $100,000, they're not going to get that much more additional benefit for that amount of money. They're just not, because that point has reached where there's just no effectiveness in that amount of money.
Right, plus
but there is really serious effectiveness in that. The range between 10 and 20, say.
Right. If I could just repeat what you said, so for the people that aren't as familiar with campaigns, and my proposal. I don't think I mentioned this before, but the proposal is that you get a one-to-one match, but only after you achieve $5,000. And it's in increments of 5,000 until it gets to 26,000. And I did it that way because even though it might be fun for me as someone who loves politics to have 20 or 30 candidates running, I do want to be careful. Like you can do campaign finance reform that doesn't work. I'm not sure we want 20 or 30 candidates running, and there's other ways to deal with that. But I just put this out as a simple way to start making change. It is a draft, by the way. If people in the community or the council, they want to make it 1,000 or 2,000, or I just put out something I thought would be simple. So just to agree with you about the way the money works, I mean, what makes us think that because someone is a good fundraiser or has ties to people with money, that makes them a good council member?
Right.
I mean, you could be a great council member. Someone from Beach Flats who's a working class person, they could be a great council member. I mean, if you look at who runs the council, Don Lane is a great council member, and he works for a foundation that deals with donations. I happen to think it's a great foundation, but he has that background. I did fundraising for People Power for 15 years, so even though I don't personally have any money, I was familiar with raising money. John Leopold was a fundraiser at UCSC, another great supervisor. Hillary Bryant was one of the leaders in the Rotary Club, which raises tons of money for great causes all around the
Community Center on the board.
Yeah, right. But we have a pattern here where the people on the council are people that did fundraising, and I don't think that necessarily makes you a better council member.
Right.
We can have, and we don't have that many people who are up for running for council either. Like, you're one of the brave ones. Like, it's not people knocking on, clamoring to be on council. Maybe if we took out this requirement that you have to be able to raise so much money, that we'd have a wider range of qualified candidates.
And I do think, as a general matter, it's going to level the electoral playing field. I think that's a good thing. And I also think that it might actually provide opportunities for more diversity in our city council candidates, and that's something that we really do need in this town, as you well know. If we were able to have a $5,000 matching fund for someone who is African American, Latino, woman, people who aren't really familiar with raising funds but can and do have enough friends to get them to that limit, that $5,000, they might be able to really make an effective campaign run and serve on council. And these are the very people that are going to benefit that, who are people we want to have in public life, who want to serve in public office, who want to make the commitment that you've made, as a council member, to do the things that you need to do to make it a better community.
What about a young person?
Absolutely. I know that's something. That's a focus of your campaign strategy and your strategy, and frankly, as being a community member, is wanting to see a younger demographic being represented on council. And I completely agree. Couldn't agree more. Now, whereas somebody who has just graduated from UCSC probably has a ton of debt, but wants to serve, has lived here, wants to serve their city, their community as a council member, might have all the qualifications in the world, have the youth, the experience, the energy, the motivation, the creative ideas, that substance that really people want to see, but just can't get over the hurdle of raising enough money to run an effective campaign, to give them the chance, the opportunity to serve.
Right, so this is obviously a complicated topic. I hope people are thinking about it seriously. I've assembled a lot of information with some college interns, actually, on a website called Santa Cruz electionreform.org. So I really want to encourage people to go to that website, Santa Cruz electionreform.org. And like I said, this is really the best tool we have going right now for getting money out of politics. That's why it's being used by 60 cities across the country.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying it's a perfect tool, but it's the best one that's in our toolbox right now. LA, San Francisco, Ventura, Boulder, Thousand Oaks.
Right.
And I have, if you go to that website, santacruzelectionreform.org, there's an interactive map where you can see all the dots on the map, and some of them, like 5 or 10 of them, you can actually look at the exact ordinances from those cities. So this is not, I mean, it's fun to think about in the abstract and to guess how it might affect politics, but if you want money out of politics, this isn't just like, oh, let's guess about this. This is really our best tool for it to happen.
And to be fair, there are folks in town who aren't as enthusiastic about this legislation. As I was reading the Santa Cruz Weekly article on the campaign finance reform and the Sentinel article as well, wise political wags such as Fred Keeley says, well, you're doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. He thinks that campaign finance reform is a generally good idea, that something should be done, particularly on a state and national level, but it's not necessarily needed here in Santa Cruz. I don't necessarily agree with that point of view because I don't think that's far-sighted enough. What you're doing is looking down the road. Just as much as you're looking now at this situation, you're looking down the road. Right. And I think that visionary approach is maybe what Fred was lacking in that particular comment.
I mean, those of us who are already in office and have these relationships with all the people who've won and raised money, and like Hillary's been a great mayor in a lot of ways with the tragedy and all that. And it's hard for us to say, let's change the system because people are going to feel defensive, and that's not necessarily warranted because we're not attacking anyone. It's not a specific thing. No. But it's hard for Fred or me or anyone to say, let's get down to specifics and change the system. It's a lot easier in a grassroots way for people that aren't part of the system, but somebody has to take a role in this who is part of the system, and Don and I are willing to do it. Yeah. So I completely disagree with Fred, of course, when he says it's the, what does he say?
He says you're doing the wrong thing for the right reasons.
Right. Well, you got to do something, Fred. You know what I mean? It's like as someone who has a little bit of power, it's hard for us to do anything at any level of government because we all got into this elected office with this system. Right. So it's really easy for us as elected officials to start nitpicking and, oh my gosh, that wouldn't have worked for me, or that's not going to help my friend, or I don't want them to feel bad. Or in the meantime, the country's going down the money tubes down the drain, so even though it's hard because some people are going to feel bad and it's not going to be perfect. If we pass it, it won't be a perfect reform. We got to do it. I mean, and 60 cities across the country have.
And I think maybe what Fred is alluding to is even with the excesses you see nationally in this glut of money they're coming in to the electoral process, this ordinance and you and I sitting here aren't pointing fingers at people or saying, you're what's wrong with the electoral process. You're raising a lot of money. You have unlimited, reach into people's pockets, and you're what's wrong with the electoral system. That's not it at all. No. It is more of a structural problem that we have to handle, and it's not a personal thing.
Right. In fact, I mean, hopefully if I was a senator, I have the guts to also have this kind of proposal. And there is someone with the guts to have this proposal. Sam Farr, our congressman, is one of the co-sponsors of a bill called H.R. 20, which would do the same thing. It would create special taxes on corporations to create a fund of public financing. That money would be available to candidates who agreed to limit. So I feel like I'm in good company because Sam's sitting here too. He's got it. He's working on the same thing.
Well, one thing that I did see in the program as it's laid out, are you suggesting that people who voluntarily limit themselves to the campaign maximum would be able to avoid this $1,000 fine, the $1,000 fee that you have to pay to get on the city website?
Right.
You mentioned something about that.
Yeah, that's already part of the ordinance. So when the ordinance was originally passed, there were two really important. So in case people don't know, I know you know.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, we can't make sticks. We can say that you can only accept contributions of a certain amount per person. Right. But we can't control the overall amount because of the Supreme Court decision.
That's right.
Right. So when the voluntary expenditure ordinance was first put into place, there were sort of two carrots, two rewards for doing it. One was that to be on the city's website, you didn't have to pay a $1,000 fee. Right. And then, or it's $1,400 or something.
Like that. It's a fair piece of change. Yeah.
Right. And then the second thing was that the city did a free mailer, of all the candidates who agreed to the limit. Now, it was around 2000 when candidates started not agreeing to the limit and going over them, way over it, 45,000. that city council then repealed the free letter and said that it was a budgetary issue.
Yeah, right.
So, and when we talk about budget, let's be clear. This entire proposal would cost, at the most, $50,000 a year.
I noticed that aspect of it. I was
Right.
curious. Yeah.
Which is 0.026% of the city's budget.
Right.
So, is that an expense? Sure, but to me, our city exists
Right.
to be a democracy. One of the key tools we have to create democracy is elections. If we can have a better election,
Right.
then to me, of course, it's worth $50,000.
Then you're improving on the great model of democracy. I know that I mentioned Louis LaFortune earlier, and Louis apparently had gone to Tucson, Arizona, where they have some form of publicly financed elections. He called it transformative. He said that it's so leveled the electoral playing field, it's created so much inclusiveness and diversity that he couldn't see where any municipality wouldn't want to have that plan, or at least look at that and see if it was a model that would be right for them.
Yeah, the entire state of Arizona has it, actually. It's the entire state has this model. And it's great. It's the state of Senator John McCain, who's a super interesting figure.
Right.
He's someone who speaks his mind. He's someone who's been across the aisle and all that. So this model does widen the field of who could be in council. It's not necessarily good for some of my progressive things. Like, I'm not sure, I'm a big environmentalist. I tend to favor environmental controls over economic growth or what have you. And I'm not sure this will help with that, but that's not really the point. The point is that it'll create a better electoral process.
Right.
And that's really what we're aiming for. Just to get back to the conversation we're having about making people wrong, I just want to state again, I think I said it, I think I stated earlier, that not only am I not saying names because it's unnecessary, but
Of course.
but actually we haven't had real corruption in the city of Santa Cruz because everyone has agreed to this $325 limit. So we don't have a specific problem with any individuals right now, which is why it's a great time to make a rule. Because for the candidates that didn't agree to the ordinance, like last time there were two of them, they were both very polite, as far as taking only $325 from contributions. However, if the Koch brothers or someone would have sent them a $50,000 check for the Santa Cruz election, they would have decided to cash it or not. They weren't agreeing to any ordinance, so I really appreciate them that they effectively decided not to cash it.
Yeah.
But that little thin line of someone's personal honor is the only thing that's stopping us from a corrupt election.
Right.
So, and given the way the whole country is going, I feel strongly that we need some ground rules.
Yeah.
I really appreciate those people, but I don't want to be dependent on every candidate's goodwill.
And I know it
it
was interesting to me to observe that one of the folks that's working closely with you on this is Bruce Van Allen.
Right.
And Bruce, mayor in 82 and 83 here in Santa Cruz. What was his observations about campaign finance back in the day? Has he related any of that to you to kind of to inform you about what he sees as part of the process of the problems?
Right, but not only was Bruce the mayor, of course, but he's a really hot campaign manager. He's Bill Monting's campaign manager.
Absolutely, he's on his staff.
Right.
Yeah.
So he and some students did some real research about this issue, and not surprisingly, they saw that the cost of getting a vote in the city of Santa Cruz has continued to go up since '83, almost in a straight line. The best data they had was from 2000 2012, and not surprisingly, it's gone up. It was I think highest in 2010, and I'd like to take some credit in 2012, Dawn and I, because we agreed to the limit. It didn't go up as much, but it still went up a little bit. Like I said, I still raised $26,000. It was still a piece of change. So yeah, I mean, Santa Cruz is part of the country, and in this case, we're a better part of the country because we haven't seen abject corruption, but we're still part of the country. We're still part of the same problems, and we could be part of solving these problems. We could be a leader like, I'd like Santa Cruz to be at least as good as Thousand Oaks.
Of course.
I have a vision, like, let's be as good as Thousand Oaks, guys,
Well,
let's do something right.
And I like the electoral math. I know, and I was saying that I have difficulty raising money, and yet each vote that I received 2 years ago cost me about $1.50. So if I thought that I could raise $10,000, and with the matching fund, or get to the $13,000, the $15,000 limitation, I think somebody like myself perhaps might be more competitive. Now, I'm not casting myself as being any more diverse or inclusive. I do think we need younger people. I do think we need more African Americans. I do think we need more Latinos. And I do think leveling the playing field, as you're suggesting with this, is one way to really make some strides at that, to really get to that. That is also, it's the kernel of the problem that I see here in leadership, in what we're going to be as a community, certainly. And you are sensitive to that, as sensitive as anyone in particular about those particular issues.
Thanks. It's really an honor to work at it. I mean, I was re-inspired when I read about Leland Yee. Hopefully everyone's heard about that.
Yeah, I'm sure they have.
And people were so upset about his corruption, right? Because he took money for things that weren't.
It's a betrayal of public trust.
Exactly, right. Right, but as someone who's part of the system, I asked the question, well, why did he do that? Let's keep in mind that this guy offered to smuggle guns and do other favors, not to get money for his personal pocket, but to raise money for his campaign fund. You know, I mean, this guy was under pressure to raise $3 to $5 million, $3 to $5 million to become California Secretary of State, which is an office, ironically, just to say it out loud, that oversees our election process, right?
That's right.
$3 to $5 million
Chief election officer, yeah.
to oversee the election process, right? So he felt like, whether he was correct or not, that he had to go through these unscrupulous lengths.
Right.
Well, he wasn't correct, to raise money for his campaign fund. So that, for me, that creates two questions. One, why are we putting people in this position?
Right.
Right? And two, how many other people are doing this? You know, I mean, this isn't like he was, you know, I mean, he was trying to raise this money to become Secretary of State, $3 to $5 million, you know, so I'm really surprised that we haven't seen more people break, or maybe more people are breaking and we don't know about it.
I think there's tremendous pressure. I had heard at one time that when a member of the House of Representatives, Sam Farr, for instance, is elected, he has to raise $10,000 a week every time from that time he swears into that term to the next election.
Right.
You know, and that kind of pressure. You know, is very difficult for people, you know, to bear, you know, when they're having problems, you know, raising the kind of money they need to do the kind of work that they want to do, to do the good work. Well, you know, they make that Machiavellian, you know, bargain. They say, I'm going to do really good work, you know, so I'm going to, you know, shave off a little over here because, you know, I want to keep myself in a position where I can continue to do that work.
Right, so even people with the best intentions, why put them in that position? Why force them to make those continuous ethical questions where, they're asking these people for tons of money, but they're trying not to be affected by them? Like, why put them in that position? Why put them in the position of spending all that time to raise all that money and then think they can still do a good job as leaders and politicians? It doesn't make any sense. You know?
And I think on a state level and certainly on a national level, it makes you more subject to the pressures from special interests. And I know, you know, we've been through campaigns and we have during the campaign cycle anywhere from 14 to 15 or 16 campaign fora, all hosted by the various special interests in Santa Cruz. Now those kinds of special interests really aren't putting any particularly pressure on people, I don't believe. But nevertheless, you know, it's that kind of pressure from special interests that sometimes pushes people into making bad decisions about, you know, having their hand out and what they're going to accept.
I don't know, but I certainly think it's possible, and I'd rather preclude it. So let me talk about how we're going to get here, because we're all, hopefully, you and I are excited. Hopefully everyone's watching is excited,
well, I'm sure they are.
Right? So part of that is this website, santacruzelectionreform.org. But as you pointed out, Steve, you know, the regular players in this, you know, with me and Don being somewhat of an exception, but, you know, Fred, all the regular players, all good people, we're not going to lead this because we're part of the problem, because we're part of the system, right? So the way to make this happen, yes, we can try to go to city council. I'm hopeful about it because they're all good people and hopefully they'll make the right decision. But here's how we can definitely get it done. If 1,000 voters, it takes 14,000 voters to win an election in Santa Cruz, more or less.
Give or take.
If 1,000 or more voters take a pledge now, before August 1st, before all the candidates have signed up, before they've decided whether to take the voluntary expenditure limit or not, 1,000 voters say, we're not supporting a candidate that's going to go over the limit. Right? That's a grassroots community response. That's our society getting together and saying, look, you guys are doing your thing, but we have a value here. We don't think money is free speech, and we expect politicians to have rules to the game. You guys are busy trying to win, but we're the community of Santa Cruz, and we're telling you, you need to obey this limit. Right? So we started that last week. And we got 80 pledges. We got some great ones. We got Peter Beckman, who's someone I really admire, one of the leading business leaders.
No
Beckman's
question.
Bakery,
Peter's a good guy.
right? We got Tony, the external chair from the Student Union Assembly. His name I forgot. Sorry, Tony. His last name I forgot. Remember his first name. We got the Campus Dems. So the organization that most represents students, the Campus Democrats, they've taken the pledge. The People's Democratic Club has taken the pledge. There's a young activist there's a young person named Robert Singleton from Civinomics.
Robert, yes, indeed.
Civinomics doesn't take issues about development or anti-development or whatever, but Civinomics cares about civic discourse. And even though Civinomics as a company hasn't taken a pledge, because they shouldn't, because they're trying to keep neutral, Robert Singleton, one of the founders, took the pledge. Rick Longinati took the pledge. So we only have 70 pledges so far because we've only been trying for a week, but people are stepping up.
Is part of this advocacy for the signing of the pledge, do you get any traction on that in your forum this evening? Again, trying to get people to point them toward that?
We got a lot of pledges this evening, and we have people volunteering. We're going to be calling people at home and asking them to take the pledge. Like this is a serious grassroots effort to establish rules to this game. So if all the insider politicians don't like it, so what? If we're going to establish the rules, we're going to say, look, we're not voting for you unless you agree to this limit.
You have plans to have more fora workshops. You can go door to door, do some kind of outreach behind this.
Yeah, if you go to santacruzelections.org and sign up to be a volunteer, and my intern Justin Burke is a great go-getter.
Justin's picture in the Santa Cruz Weekly there, absolutely.
Right? He'll find something for you to do, whether it's calling people or going door to door, going to city council meeting, whatever. This is a grassroots effort.
Yeah. As we go through.
I'm sorry. Let me just say one other thing, because I'm getting all excited about this kind of thing, right?
And I am as well. Yeah.
Right. So if hypothetically, there's a candidate out there that doesn't agree to the limit, we're going to make an issue about it. I'm not known for my sort of nice, suave sort of nature.
You're not a shrinking violet.
I'm not a shrinking violet, right? And when I was running, it was harder because I'd still made somewhat an issue out of it, but I didn't want it all to be about me, because it's really not. It's about having a So I'm going to be one of those people that really makes this issue. So I'm warning anyone right now who's running for city council: if you don't agree to this limit, it's nothing personal, but we're going to make it clear that you haven't agreed to a level playing field, that you're not doing what we want as far as having an election that's a process that's fair. Because, when someone gets a little bit of power, like on city council, they need to be scrupulous about the process. That's all we really have together is a fair process. And the people in Santa Cruz have a history of doing this. We have great mayors, we have great politicians, people really care about process. But this is this decade's problem, money in politics. So if you're thinking about running for office, I'm not supporting you unless you obey the limit. I'm communicating that to everyone else I know.
So in this, you're addressing this to the folks here in Santa Cruz that can get involved with this. I know as an elected official yourself now, you spend some considerable time discussing the issues of the day with other elected officials. What's been their reaction generally to this? From your fellow city council members, you mentioned Sam Farr, Bill Monning, Mark Stone. Of course, we mentioned Fred's, observations about that.
Well, it's hard. All the other people who are on the inside who've won, they're like, well, who is this going to offend? Which is understandable, and I'm scared because I'm probably offending people I need to work with every day, by raising this issue. But Don Lane, who's someone I really respect a lot, who's he doesn't have exactly the same stance as me, but he's a very even, careful person.
Right.
So he agreed to put it on the ballot, and I really appreciate that, because it makes me feel like, there's someone else on the inside who's going to stand with me. Right. And I can only talk to one other council member, so that's why it's asked to come from the people. There's the Brown Act says I can only talk to up to 2 more council members.
Right, exactly.
But again, it doesn't have to come from the council. We should give the council every chance to step up and make some changes, but either way, the people can demand this by taking a pledge and forcing the candidates to agree to it. And then, if all the candidates agree to the limit, and the whole city council is made of people who agree to the limit, then it won't be hard to institutionalize it. Because then it really won't be, it won't be about winning or losing. It'll just be about having good policy.
And I think it's important, to really bring awareness to this and have people focus on this, and particularly people who are, I think, perhaps interested in running for any kind of elective office, because there will come a time when their fundraising abilities are the magnitude of which, puts them at this upper limit. That they have to make a conscious choice. Gosh, I can remember when I was scraping together trying to get $10 to have a flyer printed so I could go talk to some folks in the neighborhoods, and now I'm a 2-term council member, or you'd be termed out then, but say a 2-term congressman or something like that, who now is able to raise an awful lot of money. And then bumps up against the limitation that heretofore wouldn't have just existed. But at least you're setting a mechanism in place where they can say, when I get there, I'm going to have some guidance. I can make a decision, to do that. And I think it's important.
Right. And it was a pleasure. Like I said, I was nervous when I agreed to the limit, but it was also a pleasure. Like I said, I had the time to have 22 neighborhood meetings. Another thing I did is, I'm revealing the secrets of electoral politics, but if you want to raise money, you find a good list of people that are likely to give money. So because I had really good supporters, I had a great list. And I was about to do a mailer to, voters all over the county who get involved in city politics. And I had bought all the envelopes, and then I thought to myself, well, maybe I should just try to mail to people in the city. So I took money from people in the county that care about the city, but I only went after people who actually live in the city because I wasn't trying to raise as much money as I could, right? I was trying to raise $26,000. So having a limit, it really helps you focus, really helps you, think about how you want to be.
And I
as a
think for
politician.
candidates who would like to be considered public office and maybe see themselves as having some difficulty, great difficulty in raising money, there is an incentive now that heretofore really didn't exist. For instance, when I tell people, just talking about Santa Cruz electoral politics, that we run citywide. And we have a $26,000 and change campaign limitation that we don't even have to, adhere to. They say, you're going to raise that much money? The ordinary person, that's a mind-boggling amount of money, to raise to run for a city council seat. But, and particularly when you're a neophyte and you're coming in and say, I can't raise $26,000, but now if you can raise 5, then you get to 10, and then there's a realistic possibility people start believing in you. They believe that you're, the more successful you become, the more people believe in your ability to be elected, the more they're likely to give you money. And it kind of, it's a kind of an organic process that goes through. And this is going to encourage people to be more engaged in that electoral process as an organic process and be able to say, you know what, I think I can get 5,000. I know enough people. And then I'll have 10. And then I'm going to really get out there, and I'm going to raise that other 5. And all of a sudden, there they are with a full-fledged campaign that, depending on the merits of what they have to say, how it resonates with the community, they can take their seat next to you on the city council or any other elected body and serve their community the way they would like to, and not have the not be without the disability of saying, God, I'd really like to do that, but I just can't raise the money to do it.
This is a funny accident that we have 2 people who ran for city council. You weren't that good at fundraising, no offense. You knew that.
Admittedly.
Right? I could have raised $40,000 or $50,000 if that would have been my goal. And for both of us, it would be an advantage to have a limit. It was an advantage for me, and I think for anyone who so yes, it would help people that aren't so good at fundraising. It also help people that are good at fundraising because it would allow you to agree to a framework and focus on what all people want to do as campaigners is just talk to people and talk about ideas, right? So I think it's going to be luxurious for people, even if they could have raised the money.
And really, the thing that I like about this the most, that it is kind of a visionary plan. We're not looking at a corrupted electoral process here in Santa Cruz saying, oh, we have to fix this. This is really, the playing field is so, inequitous here that we can't really get good people serving on city council because it's all a matter of how much money they can raise. That's not really so much the case now. But when we have this, this plan in place in the future, then I think that's where you're really looking at being able to make it possible for people to, in good faith, want to volunteer themselves to serve their community.
Right. And part of it is a message. I mean, a lot of these 60 cities have popped recently. San Francisco's ordinance, I think, is 3 or 4 years old. As it becomes more obvious that money is really subverting our democracy. In fact, Justice Stevens recently wrote a book in which he says that money in politics is one of the biggest problems we're facing as a country. So as we have this collective realization as a country, then we act locally, right? So there's actually 3 or 4 states that are considering doing this. I think Arizona and Maine are doing it already. There's 3 or 4 states that are considering doing it. If we have 70 cities, 80 cities, if we have 500 cities or 1,000 cities, we're going to be that much closer to a constitutional convention to change the Constitution to really get this huge amount of corrupting money out of politics. So, part of the reason is I think it'll, as we've talked about, probably ad nauseum. I think it'll have.
But our listeners are loving it. So
I'm sure they think about campaigns every day. But so I think
they're thinking about it now.
Okay, I hope so. Either that or they turn the channel. So I think part of it, it'll have a slightly good effect on Santa Cruz. It'll preclude Santa Cruz becoming a corrupt place, but also it'll send a signal. It will let us be part of a national movement. I mean, this is we have to do something. This is one thing we do. There's lots of other things to do. I know. Did I put in a plug for Derek Cressman yet?
No, you did not.
So I was talking about Leland Yee. There is someone running for Secretary of State who's not raising $5 million, who comes from an activist from Common Cause. He thoroughly understands the election issues because he was an activist for years to try to affect California's electoral process.
Recently,
right, his name's Derek Cressman. So wouldn't it be an obvious result if the front runner, gets thrown out of the race because he was corrupt to raise money for his campaign. Instead, we elect the purebred activist who's an outsider. I mean, to me, it's like, God, how can we not elect him after this? You know? So I endorsed him. I endorsed Eric Cressman.
And you're too modest to say, but you are really a model for that. You know, you believe in what you're saying here in terms of leveling the electoral playing field. You freely admit that you could raise, you know, much more money than limitation, and you're willing to limit yourself because you believe that it's in the common good. You know, it's in the common good for our electoral process, and it makes a statement about the insidious nature of money coming into campaign and the electoral process all over the country. We've had I've done a couple of shows here with Chris Finney and Harvey Dosick, the Move to Amend folks, trying to get Citizens United, you know, overturned by constitutional amendment. You know, our good friend Nancy Abbey, who's president of the PDC, has done a lot of work in California on the Disclose Act, trying to get some transparency, you know, in campaign finance, particularly in terms of corporations and whatnot. So there's a lot in this movement, but all politics are local. You and I both know that. And here is the place to start. And here is the place to start to create this model that you're talking about that really people can look at and say, you know what they're doing in Santa Cruz? You know, look at their electoral process.
Right. And we've already started because we don't have any legalese, right? I mean, just to say one more time, all the people who've run for city council have agreed to the individual limits because they cared about it and they want to respect that. So we're already kind of doing it, you know. I just want to institutionalize it so we can sort of relax and say, yeah, there's these rules that we can all, you know, play by. But we're already kind of doing it in the city of Santa Cruz, and I'm really proud of all the candidates who agreed to just take. Well,
you know, I think that there are things that will come of this that maybe, as we were talking about, are happy but unanticipated consequences, and that is, you know, a more diverse electoral field, you know, a younger electoral field, you know, people who are willing to say, you know, I think I can raise some money, and I want to serve my community, so let's do it. You're creating that opportunity for them. You know, and you, I know, in the work that you've done in sustainable transportation, with bikes, things like that, in the environment, you know, you are all about creating opportunities for people, you know, and not only that, but sustaining, you know, the things that we have and making sure that they exist in the future for people to involve themselves in. This is an example of that.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you know, it's a nice idea. I hope it happens. I'm not sure, but either way, I just feel like we need to have rules, right? I mean, we just don't have a legal playing field. So, again, please consider taking the pledge. Go to santacruzelection.org. Think about it carefully, read the information, and then if you agree that we can have a local model for limiting money in politics, take the pledge. Santa Cruz election reform. And I'm not sure I said that before, right? santacruzelection.reform.org.
It bears repeating. So,
Thanks.
Thanks. You know, I think this is such an idea, really, whose time has come. You know, and now is the time in Santa Cruz to get people educated about this, not just the national dissatisfaction of money in politics, but also, you know, how it can play out in your own community and how you can actually do something by signing the pledge, you know, by saying, you know, I'm not going to vote for it. No one who is not agreeing to the campaign spending limitations is going to get my vote. You know, I may agree with you on several other matters, but really, we have to make a change here, and you have to be part of the change, or you're going to be part of the problem. And that's not finger pointing, that's simply pointing out the fact that some people are going to be very resistant to the idea of limiting in any way how much money they can raise and spend.
I don't think, you know, I think once we get 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people, like I said, I think it's going to be relief for candidates, because ultimately everyone wants to try hard to win, but when you have rules about it, it's more relaxing, you know. You're doing a foot race, or you're playing soccer, or whatever. Like,
no question.
You don't have to be thinking the whole time about, you know, like, gosh, is it fair if I, you know, if I dribble out of the line, or if I, you know, if I use my hands to throw the thing in the goal, you know, like, it's really not that pleasant. No. I really think, you know, no one I've talked to who's thinking about running for office has said, you know, but I want to raise $50,000 or $100,000. You know, everyone has said, "Oh my gosh, you know, what if everyone doesn't do it?" That's what, when I go talk to prospective candidates, they say, some of them say, "Yes, I'm going to agree to that," and others say, and I'm not going to say who yet because it's not about the candidates.
Of course not.
Others say, "That sounds great, but I'm worried other people aren't going to obey it." Right? So
you don't want to start from a disadvantageous position when you're trying to win. When you're trying to win.
Right. So this way, that's why we're doing this campaign now. So please don't. I've had some people tell me, "I'm not sure I want to take the pledge. I want to see who's running." That's not my idea. My idea is set out some rules now, get everyone agree to them, and then have the race.
And I don't think people should worry about that. In my experience in the last couple elections, and I'm sure this one will be the same, you get a relatively large field of really well-intentioned public citizens. You know, people who want to serve. You know, to a person. To a man and woman. You know, there are people who want to give their time and their energy to make Santa Cruz a better place to live. So, you know, if we can level that playing field to make it possible so more people are willing to, you know, really take that on themselves and say, you know what, I think I want to be a part of that process as well because I believe in the process.
Right, and again, in case people don't get this, there's 60 cities across the country. So this is not a radical Santa Cruz idea. This is Santa Cruz is going to be as cool as Boulder, as cool as Thousand Oaks, as cool as LA, as cool as it's like 12 cities in North Carolina or South Carolina. You know, this is not, you know, we're just stepping up a little bit. We're not leading the charge.
Well, Micah, thank you for all of your work. I'll be certain to sign that pledge myself and urge as many people as I can to do that.
Thanks.
As we go out, we're going to show a short video to get people a little bit more information about campaign finance reform generally. So we kind of make it a full evening forum, and then we're going to welcome Nick Brandt, who's the Director of Technology here, talk a little bit about CTV. But thank you, my friend, for being here. Thank you for all of your work, both on council and as a person who wants to make Santa Cruz the model in a lot of ways for other communities. So it's much appreciated by me.
And thank you, and thank all there's volunteers in the room now, in case you didn't know. And I just, you know, I'm really, you know, speaking of public access to democracy, the fact that you guys have managed to keep community television alive through all these changes, it's really, really wonderful, and I guess we're going to hear about it from Nick.
Let's do that video, and we'll welcome Nick.
All right, here's your brief explanation of campaign finance. Most campaign finance is monitored by the FEC, which was created after Nixon in order to keep certain basic ground rules operable. Those ground rules are adjusted and implemented by a bipartisan commission appointed by the President and approved by the Senate and by their support staff, who are typically lawyers and trained advocates. A quick look at the shape scheme. Triangles primarily just donate money. Round circles both spend and raise money, and everyone else sort of has multiple options of spending and donating and raising. So campaigns get up to all kinds of electoral operations. They run ads, they turn out volunteers. They're really powerful, and they're open to a wide variety of donations, but they're all limited. Those donations are not limited in only one case, and that is the case of the candidate giving to their own campaign, established by the Supreme Court case Buckley versus Vallejo. Even though they're limited, single individuals are an important source, but even more important is the source of political action committees, one of the biggest and most important ways that campaigns raise money. PACs, of course, get their money from individuals, but also from other PACs, which means there are different types of PACs. There are all sorts of voluntary PACs, there are PACs associated with political parties, and there are industry-specific PACs. Typically, political action committees don't do much electioneering. Most of their purpose is to raise, transfer, and donate money. Other groups, which we'll talk about later, do most of the electioneering. Although all PACs are limited, I as an individual could end up giving to multiple different types of PACs because there are so many kinds. I could give to the PAC associated with my business, I could give to the PAC associated with my political party, and I could give to the PAC associated with something else that I like. Political parties and the political action committees associated with them are also a very important source for both fundraising and for outside electoral support for candidates. While party PACs raise and donate money to the candidate's campaign, party committees can run ads and donate and coordinate volunteers in order to help the candidate. Lots of different ways, but unfortunately,
that's a great segment with Micah Posner. Micah has worked so hard as a city council member, really doing these kinds of things to make the community better, and particularly with campaign finance reform. So we all, I think, applaud him for that. I told you at the start of the show that CTV has gone through a revisioning process over the last few months, and following the grand reopening last month, we're now doing production in the studio, and one of the guiding lights of that whole process is our Director of Technology here at CTV, Nick Brandt. Nick, welcome.
Thanks, great to be here.
Nick, give us a little background about yourself, and then how you see the changes in the CTV playing out with kind of a more volunteer-driven, organization and production staff and whatnot.
Sure. Well, my career started in public access. I began at a station where I was going to college, and when I left college, they sort of hired me on as their Director of Technology. I did a similar transition at that in Ashland, Oregon, and then when Kathy Bisbee found me up in Ashland, Oregon, she kind of said, "Hey, I'm working on this project, and then there might be another project after that." And so here I am, and Currently, we're at the end of the 3-month revisioning process that we've been through for technology for CTV. And so the station is open again. We're really excited. This is the first live studio show to be recorded in the new HD studio. So really the revisions centered around reduction in staff and more efficient technologies as well.
And I know I went through, as did many other volunteers, about 6 weeks of training, because now all the volunteers here are certified either as studio supervisors, production assistants, or equipment specialists. Just give us a brief overview of maybe each one of those skills and what part they're going to play as we move forward.
Sure. So operationally, we really have to operate the public access program on volunteers. And so we've devised this certified volunteer program, we call it, where we have three pools of volunteers. The first is really production assistants, and those are people who operate camera on staff productions that we do to raise revenue. And then the equipment specialists hand out the equipment to reserving users. That would be field equipment. Right. And then the studio supervisors really operate the studio. So the studio supervisors actually have a key card that lets them into the building. They get an alarm code, so they learn all the ins and outs of opening and closing the building and allowing the users to use the studio. They also know basic troubleshooting, how to turn everything on and off, and they really know how to sort of shepherd your users through the process. And so
it was amazing to me as I went through the training for an equipment specialist, and I didn't really venture into the production or supervising anything like that, how much information there is to know. You know, really how much you have to have, you know, at hand to be able to really make the studio function, to be able to kind of get the right equipment out for people to make sure they can do what they want to do when they're doing some production of some kind. And it's just remarkable, you know, that people are learning all these crafts and make the commitment to CTV to do that.
Yeah, we're excited about the commitment. You know, when we started this program, we had a very large pool of volunteers to choose from, and I'm happy to say that most of those volunteers are still with us today, went through the cohort, and are really, they're actually certified now, and they're going through what's their last phase of training, which is what we would call their checkout shift, which is like the last shift before we say, okay, here's the keys to the kingdom, now you can operate everything. And we're really excited that, you know, the public access program will survive because of certified volunteers just like yourself.
And you know, in my time here, I've been fortunate enough to do, you know, several of the Voice from the Village with Charlie and some other things. It's just really a treasure in the community. You know, people who look at CTV as something that's a cherished institution. You know, it's family to them. And I think that even during this revisioning process, you seem to be able to, and Kathy, kind of preserve that family feeling that we really are part of a community here and want to continue to be part of the community as we go forward.
Yeah, first and foremost, we really noticed when we walked into CTV as an outside organization, when we walked in, we noticed, oh, there's a huge community here already. Let's pull on that and see what we can do operationally to make sure that we're here for forever. And now we've got a group of people who are going to continue to teach those who come after them and after them and after them. So we're really creating a generational organization now that is a community. We always like to say we're putting public access back into the hands of the public.
That's wonderful, yeah. And I think that's the one thing that people really value about community TV is they've all been able to see that, you know, I've got some access to what's happening in my whole community. You know, I'm part of the public, and yet these are the things that are going on around me, and my community TV station reflects that. You know, it reflects the community values as much as anything else. And I think that's what's important, and that's what's really, in my observation of kind of the training and talking to people, that's as important to preserve as anything.
Absolutely. I think the best part about CTV as an organization is we're really the melding of the best possible media that you can get in your community. So we've got, you know, the public access, which is your voice as a community. Then we've got the educational or cruise TV channel, which is really some high quality local production content that we shoot here in studio. And then the last part of that is your government content, so you can always stay informed as a citizen. You know, Micah was just on the show, and we see him almost every Tuesday night on the city council in its entirety for almost 7 hours a night. So.
And that's so important. I think people don't realize, you know, how much public access community TV does give to the public, because certainly if people have any interest in local politics, they can always tune into the Regional Transportation Commission, the Board of Supervisors, very important meetings, very important public meetings where many of the issues of the day are being discussed, and your community TV or public access is providing that for you. As we go forward, are there going to be more training? Are you going to try to develop the volunteer staff to get more folks involved?
Yeah, so just a quick snapshot of what's coming up. We're excited about training the trainers now in the volunteer program. So each certified volunteer will learn how to train other certified volunteers. And then the other thing that people have been asking me for is, okay, I'm brand new to CTV. How do I get involved? So keep watching our website, communitytv.org, for an actual class schedule where you can come learn how to do all this stuff and how to produce with us.
Well, Nick, it's been great really going through the trainings with you and getting to know you a bit, and certainly your participation here has been valued by everyone, so a great deal of thanks goes to you for kind of helping us through this transition. Certainly, I wouldn't be sitting here doing a Voices from the Village were it not for folks like yourself and our certified volunteers being here, so we certainly thank you so much and look forward to working with you more in the future. And again, everybody, this is the first of the Voices from the Village during this new era as community TV. We hope on behalf of Charlie Phillips and everybody here, we want to hope that this is the first of many shows like this so that we can continue to inform and enrich the community just as community TV does so often. So thank you for tuning in. Again, my name is Steve Pleich, and you've been watching Voices from the Village. Thank you and good night.